Morning, everyone. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Ani-mity. I literally just woke up and decided I was going to do a recording. So we're going to see how this one goes. We'll see how coherent I end up sounding or how any of this is going to end up going. Uh, I've got a long and busy week ahead of me this week. I've got like 6 back-to-back-to-back days of stuff that I'm doing, and it's just going to keep me very, very busy for a while. But I did want to make sure that I still managed to get this video out to you guys. And this is gonna be a video that I think I have done something similar to this video before. I've talked about a similar topic to this before, but it's something that I always find myself coming back to and having like somewhat of a discussion with someone. It just like comes up. And I have a story I wanted to kind of share with it. So for those of you who've been with my channel for a while now, for those of you who have followed some of my journey, I had there's a long stretch of time where I was just looking for a job, looking for something to be able to, start the process of making something of myself and start the process of, becoming a functioning adult now that I'd graduated from college. And there was something that was really disheartening about the fact that I wasn't able to find something right away. And like I wasn't looking for something in my major. I wasn't even looking for something necessarily that I'd be passionate about. Because for me, a job in the end, I always saw it as just whatever I'm doing, I just want to be making money. I just want to be able to support myself and I just want to be able to fund myself for the things that I want to do. Like I have my passions. I love to do screenwriting. I love to do the process of being creative and making up my stories and make up my worlds that I get to invite people to. But I never went into I never went into things thinking that that was going to be my bread and butter. That was going to be the thing that made me my money or be sustainable. That was the number one thing that we learned from screenwriting was just again over and over and over again. It's not going to be sustainable. You might make a lot of money, but that money is not going to last forever. So it was something that I always went into knowing, and I always wanted to find a job doing something else. So I applied to a whole bunch of different things, and given that I don't have any prior work experience, finding a job was really, really, really hard, or still is really, really, really hard for me, I should say. It was part of why I signed up for the Disney College program here, just because I wanted someone that would give me experience so that I can go back to looking for work and I can go back to just trying to find something and trying to make something in which I can make a career or make a profession out of it. Um, it's just it's been a process. Um, but one of the jobs I'll always remember that I sat down for an interview for was with a school. uh, I don't even remember how I ended up, like, applying. I think it was, like, I followed a lead on a substitute teacher role of sorts for an anime club or something like that. They just needed someone to kinda, like, just be a figurehead is how I think it was described or something like that. So I applied for something there, and then from that, I got another email saying like, "Hey, here's this program for people who, they don't have a teaching degree. We are here to like mold you into becoming the next like teachers, to mold you into becoming like, to getting you to the point where you can have a degree that you can run these classes and we'll be as hands off as we possibly can be." And I'm like, that sounds really, really interesting. And I wasn't really sure how much I wanted to really go ahead and do it. But, you know, I figured, desperate times be desperate. I'm gonna try this out. So I sat down, sent in my application, and got called in for an interview. So I got all dressed up. I set up my area, and I got ready to do my interview. And it was going okay. We were asking, they asked me some questions. I'd like to think that I answered well because I ended up getting a second interview after that. There's one question in particular that they asked that always kind of stood out to me, which was I'm trying to remember the exact question, but it was like, how would I respond to failure? And I do remember specifically the word that they used was failure. So I asked them, I'd like to think the obvious question. Well, how do you define failure? And I broke them at that point. Like, I asked them how they define failure, and they just completely broke apart, and they just started, like, going off on tangents or stammering, stuttering, and at it was that point that I realized I didn't necessarily want to work with them. They're a great program, I'm sure. They're a wonderful opportunity for a lot of different people, and I hope that they do find someone that ended up working out really, really well for them. I'm not saying one thing or another about them or about any kind of experience. I definitely didn't have really an experience. I only had that interview with them. But just by that question and by this mentality that they did seem to have from what they were able to provide as an answer, I knew I didn't want to be there. Because it's one thing that I've taken the time to kind of reflect on, I guess, from many an experience I've had now, is how much I've had failure stigmatized for me as just a term. It's I remember just so often in school, we would be made to see, like, one failed test of any kind being the thing. And I'm not saying, like, repeatedly failing tests, just one test being the thing that kind of would set you back and would be the thing that kind of makes your entire existence afterward really, really stressful. And I feel like I've learned since then, there is such a thing as being a good student or being smart, but just not being a good test taker. Now, I'm not claiming to be smart, I am claiming not to be a good test taker is the thing I've definitely experienced myself. But then because of that, it just led to this very stressful existence that I lived when I was in school, 'cause I was always trying my hardest, I was always trying to do the things that helped me to study and trying to do things so I could wrap my head around understanding what they were saying and trying to ask the questions. And I mean, I guess out of a sense of pride, I never asked directly for help, I just tried to, like, somewhat get enough that I could make some kind of understanding in my own head, and usually that understanding would be wrong, and then I'd never actually ask to sit down and ask to have that conversation with my teachers, and I need to get better at doing that because I always just had this perception in my head that I was wasting their time, that, like, "Well, everyone else is understanding this. Why am I not understanding this? Why is it taking so much longer to come to me compared to what it is for other people?" And it's a mentality I guess I still have even now, like, with the job I have with Disney. It's like I'm not perfect at my job for certain. Um, and sometimes I kind of just stress myself out because of it that I'm so fixated on trying to do everything and getting it to that point of being perfect. So that way I can move on and do other stuff. But then in doing so, because I mean, it's one of those things that when you're working in a setting like that where you have a whole lot of people that are constantly doing stuff, right? Like when you're, trying to clean a bathroom and you just cleaned off the countertop and then someone else is gonna come along, like, 3 seconds afterward, and they're gonna end up messing it up again. Do you spend that time constantly doing that? Or do you spread it out where it's like, "Okay, I took care of this, so it's not going to build up again," and move on to another task? Because ultimately, that's what you should be doing, it's what you have to do to be able to keep on top of everything. But I just have this mental barrier of, like, if it isn't perfect, then someone's gonna make a comment on it, and then that's gonna reflect badly on me, and then I'll feel like I failed. And it's again coming back to this mentality of what does it mean to fail? And I've just had that word so stigmatized for me that failure has to be a bad thing, that if you fail, it's a mark on you of being less than adequate or being less than efficient. It basically failure equates to not being enough as a human being to deserve existing is the way that I feel with that. It's the way I've always associated that word, is that failure means that you're unworthy. And it's someone who's always had this like self-doubt and these like self-deprecating thoughts that I've always had. I've always, always, always been afraid of failure. And I shouldn't be. And you shouldn't be either. People in general should not be afraid of failure because it is ultimately we're human. We are going to fail whether we want to or not. But the thing is we need to be able to figure out how to adjust from where we fail. Like don't the thing that I want to get better at doing is seeing failure as that next jumping off point. That it's my aunt I think put this the best way of like think of it like a recipe or like a formula or however you want to put where it's like a certain combination of inputs generates one output. Now, the output is not right or wrong, it's just the output. And it might not be the output you necessarily wanted, but you found out that's how I generate that output. It's like a I guess for me specifically, the best way to put this is like I sometimes mess around with code. I'm trying to teach myself how to do Python and that kind of thing. And sometimes, I don't know what I'm doing with Python and I'll generate a random thing and then I'll generate a random output that isn't necessarily the output that I wanted. But I'm like, okay, before today, I didn't know how to generate that output. I didn't know that's how that was generated. I can now take that, put it in my tool belt, and now I know that's how I generate that output. But now let me try a different variable and try to change up how I do that. And that should be just the way in which I address everything is that, okay, I'm trying to clean this bathroom and make sure that's all good. My input is I'm trying to just make sure this area is perfect before I leave. My output is I'm stuck there repeatedly cleaning it. That's not the output that I necessarily wanted, but it's the output that I got. So let me try a different input of just doing a brief clean and then moving on to the next task. So that way I can spread myself out a little bit more evenly and cover a lot more ground because I have a lot more jobs I'm trying to get done. It's just like the little changes like that can save you so much as far as this like mental agony, especially because for someone just like for someone who gets into that mentality of like everything needs to be perfect, the slightest bit acting against you will ruin your entire day, and then you'll just think so poorly of either the people around you, or mostly in my case, you'll think so poorly of yourself because you'll think, man, why can't I just have it be perfect? Why is it that like it's not even so much like I blame like the one moment on why everything went poorly for me, but it's more like, why was I not good enough that I wasn't, that everything all the work I did didn't get screwed over by that one moment. It's the when one variable is capable of messing everything up, it's so incredibly, incredibly frustrating because then everything that happens past that moment, you start looking at so much more critically and you start looking at it and just all the pride and joy that I'd feel with doing something immediately goes away from the moment that I notice that hole. It like, I think even, like, repeatedly in my screenwriting class, it'd be like, someone would point out, like, a plot inconsistency or, like, a minor mistake I'd make in, like, grammar or syntax or that kind of thing from an earlier scene, and then immediately everything that I did with that script afterward, I would look at so much more critically and have so much less, like, of a fondness toward. And that's just the way my brain's always been wired. I'm trying my hardest to, like, adjust and change it. But I also realize that it's not just me. I'm not the only one with this kind of mentality. Because there's a video that I eventually do need to edit. It's just very, very long, and I just don't have the time to sit down and do the thing of editing it. There's a video that Ollie and I recorded where the conversation eventually did skew to this exact topic, which is why I wanted to make this video talking about failure and talking about kind of this perception that I've noticed a lot online, this feeling that I've noticed a lot online when it comes to trying new things and when it comes to this, again, fear of failure. It's the it feels so much like, especially, looking at the industry, looking at how creativity happens and how products are designed, is the best products are the ones that took a chance. things that will always stand the test of time, things that will always be remembered are the things where someone had a crazy idea, they didn't know it was gonna work, they just kinda threw something at the wall and gave it a shot, and if it didn't work out, it is what it is. But then it did. Those are the projects that I know are always going to be remembered, and it feels like lately we've gotten fewer and fewer of those kind of projects. I just think everything that I've seen is either a rehash of an idea that we've already seen, or it's piggybacking off of an IP that we've already seen. Like a prime example, I think of this is with Star Wars. Like I do love Star Wars, and I do think that the ways in which they've expanded the lore through things like Bad Batch, Clone Wars, all that kind of stuff is really, really interesting. But there is this feeling now when it comes to a Star Wars product, for me at least. There's always this feeling that it's going to be good for a moment, and then immediately it's going to be run into the ground. Like, particularly with Mandalorian, I felt this where, like, season one of Mandalorian, I thought was fantastic. I loved it. Season two, fantastic. It was cool. And then I've just been reading into everything else that happens afterward, and it feels like it is following this trend. Even with Bad Batch, I also felt this of just like it's really, really good, but then it gets this feeling of like we're just running it into the ground now, and like all the good that it had gets kind of like sucked away the longer that it keeps going on. And it's like I don't mind that we get more Star Wars stuff, especially because that the Star Wars universe is so massive that you can really, really go in any creative direction you want to, and it will still feel fresh and that kind of thing. But it's also like why does it have to be Star Wars again? Why do we have to, continue in this world that we've been in for so long now? It's like there's only so many ways I feel like you can tell the events of Order 66, which feels like that's the main thing where a lot of these spin-offs kind of like kick off, which I mean, it makes sense. Like Order 66 was such an important event for Star Wars, but I don't know, it just, like, I always want to see something different, and I feel like every time we do see something where it's like, "Oh, you wanna see this other perspective of something that happened during Order 66 with this other Jedi that survived," it just feels so I don't even wanna say unoriginal because that again, it still has some, like, original beats of sorts, but it's just, like, eventually that good feeling does excuse me, does eventually feel like it just goes away over time. And I kind of hate that feeling so much. But it's just like we were talking a lot about like this feeling that creativity isn't necessarily where it should be, at least when it comes to a lot of the people online, where it just comes like people are just repeating the safe comments. People are just repeating the safe mentalities to have without really any time to really sit down and grapple with it. And then there's this perception of like what it means being a part of this, like, general world around us, which is a whole other topic, and, again, I love the places that the discussion goes in, with the video that I made with Alia, so I'm really, really looking forward to having that go out to you guys when I have the chance to, but yeah, it's a great video. I love that video so much, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys, but yeah, it just there's stuff like this when it comes to, like, talking about I guess self-worth is the main thing that I associate failure with. Because usually when I consider something a failure, I consider it a direct judgment of myself and a judgment of my worth is, I guess, the way I've always, like, seen it. And that's something that I do want to change because of that it shouldn't ever feel that way, and no one deserves to feel that way about themselves, and no one deserves to feel that way about someone else. You are more than a moment in time, and you're more than one bad day. And I say that hoping that I will remember that for myself, but I have a funny feeling I never am going to. So I do hope someone does take that for themselves. It's something that I wish that I was able to just grapple onto and was able to just believe and channel that into everything that I do. But it's harder for me to do. I've always had that like I've always had that mentality where it just makes it so much harder trust that, you know? We'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. Be on the lookout for that other video coming out soon. I'm very much looking forward to sharing that with you guys. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.